I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I became smart enough, kind enough, accomplished enough, my parents would finally see me. Not just notice me in passing, not just nod absently when I spoke, but see me. See the daughter who stayed up late studying, who won awards they never attended, who lived her life tiptoeing around their indifference, hoping one day it might soften into love. That belief died on the morning of my college graduation. The sun was barely up when my mother called me. I pressed the phone between my shoulder and ear as I straightened my hair in my tiny dorm mirror, hoping for a "we're so proud of you" or even a "what time should we be there?" Instead, her voice floated through the speaker, calm and casual. "Sweetie, can you pick up chips? People are coming over early for the Super Bowl party." I stared at my reflection, cap and gown hanging behind me, honor cords draped over a chair, mascara wand frozen in my hand. Are you still coming to the ceremony?" "We'll see," she said. "Depends on the traffic. And when people start showing up. Anyway, don't forget the sour cream chips. Your dad likes those." The call ended before I could respond. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile at my reflection. I told myself it would be fine. They were busy. They'd come. They had to. But deep down, beneath the layers of hope I used to wrap around myself like armor, I sensed the truth. They weren't coming. At the ceremony, my classmates found their families instantly, clusters of laughter, hugs, flowers, camera flashes. I scanned the crowd for a familiar face, but all I found were strangers clapping for their own. When it was my turn, the dean called my name. "Ava Reyes, summa cum laude." I walked across the stage, each step heavy, echoing in my ears. The auditorium erupted with applause, but none of it belonged to me. No cheers, no wave from the seats, no proud tears waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Only an empty folding chair in the section where my parents were supposed to be. Still, I shook the dean's hand. I posed for the photo. I kept my chin lifted because breaking down would have meant admitting what I'd spent years refusing to believe, that I didn't matter enough to show up for. I sat back down and checked my phone, desperate for any sign that maybe they were parking the car or running late. A new message from Mom appeared. "Which chips did you say again? Green or blue bag? People are here already." My throat closed as the screen blurred. There it was, the confirmation I didn't ask for but always feared. On the most important day of my life, my existence ranked below bags of chips and halftime commercials. After the ceremony ended, families swarmed their graduates. I slipped quietly out a side door, diploma tube clutched to my chest like it was the only proof I had that the day had happened. In the parking lot, alone in my car, I finally let myself cry. The kind of crying that comes from years of swallowing disappointment until it spills over all at once. 11 minutes later, with mascara streaks drying on my cheeks, I opened a flight booking app and typed the words that would pull me out of the life that never wanted me. One-way ticket. When I pressed confirm purchase on that one-way ticket to Seattle, I wasn't thinking about logistics or consequences. I wasn't thinking about my bank account or job prospects or where I would sleep once I landed. My chest still ached from crying, and my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. All I knew was that I couldn't stay, not in that town, not in that house, not in a life where I felt like a ghost haunting my own childhood. The flight left in 6 hours. I drove home like a sleepwalker, barely aware of the familiar streets rolling past. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had my whole life, trimmed lawns, identical brick houses, the faint smell of someone barbecuing. It struck me how small everything suddenly felt, like a toy town I'd outgrown without realizing. Inside the house, laughter echoed from the living room. The Super Bowl pre-show boomed from the TV, and my parents were already preparing for guests. My dad didn't look up when I walked in. My mother gave me a distracted smile while arranging chips in a bowl, the same chips she valued more than my graduation. "Oh, good," she said. "Did you get the blue bag?" "People prefer the blue bag." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was there to say? How do you tell your parents you crossed the stage alone because they chose a party over you? How do you ask why? How do you ask ever expecting a real answer? I didn't bother trying. I went to my room, pulled out my old duffel bag, and packed what little I owned, 3 pairs of jeans, a handful of shirts, my sketchbook, a worn novel, and my laptop. I hesitated before placing my graduation cords on top. They felt like trophies from a game I'd won without an audience. Before leaving, I scribbled a note on a torn sheet of notebook paper. Don't worry. I'm safe. I just can't stay here anymore. It wasn't poetic, but it was true. I placed it on the kitchen counter. My parents didn't notice, the door closed behind me without a single head turning. At the airport, reality finally began to sink in. I stood at the baggage drop with my duffel and a heart full of uncertainty. A sensible voice in my head whispered, "You're making a mistake. You have no plan. No job. No savings." But another voice, quieter, but steadier, whispered back, "You have yourself now. That's enough." When the plane took off, I watched my hometown shrink into tiny squares and lines until it disappeared completely. I expected panic to rise in my chest, but instead, I felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in years. Breath. Space. Freedom. Seattle greeted me with rain, cold enough that it snuck through the seams of my jacket. The air smelled like coffee and the ocean, a scent so different from home it felt like stepping into another version of reality. I booked a few nights in a cheap Airbnb, tiny, cramped, with mismatched furniture and a heater that clicked every few seconds. But it was mine, and no one ignored me there. Day by day, I searched for jobs, finally landing a late-night shift at a diner that smelled like syrup and burnt coffee. The customers were grumpy, the hours long, and the tips unpredictable, but it was a start. A life. My life. In the quiet nights after work, I'd sit by the window, listening to the rain against the glass. I felt scared, yes. But beneath the fear was a growing certainty. Running away wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. A beginning I had given myself. The months that followed were a blur of exhaustion and small victories, steps forward so tiny that no one else would notice, but to me, they felt monumental. The diner became my second home, or maybe my first, since the word home had never truly fit the house I grew up in. I worked through the nights, pouring coffee for tired strangers and memorizing orders until they lodged permanently in my brain. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something of my own, even if it was just the ability to pay rent on time. My roommate, Mia, the girl with galaxy-colored hair and a sharp laugh, was the first person to make Seattle feel less like a temporary escape and more like a place where I could grow roots. She visited me at the diner almost every night, sliding into the same corner booth with her sketchbook and asking for pancakes with extra syrup. "You staying here forever?" she asked one night, kicking her boots up on the seat. I shrugged. "I don't know yet." "Well," she said, flipping open her sketchbook, "you look like someone who could build a forever anywhere." I didn't know how to respond to that kind of faith. I wasn't used to people seeing potential in me, not without strings or conditions. When I started drawing again, it was almost by accident. One slow afternoon, I doodled on a napkin between refilling coffee mugs. The habit felt familiar, like finding an old sweater you forgot you loved. Mia noticed immediately. "Holy crap, Ava, you've been hiding this?" "It's nothing," I said, embarrassed. "Just something I used to do." She snatched the napkin from my hand and examined it like it was priceless. "Post it." "No way." "Ava, I'm serious. People would love this." I didn't believe her, but that night, after everyone fell asleep, I took a picture of the napkin sketch and posted it anonymously. By the next morning, it had thousands of likes. I stared at the screen, stunned. I'd spent years trying to earn the approval of the people who never gave it. And now strangers online, people who had no reason to be kind, were telling me my art mattered. That was the first spark of something bigger. I began drawing every night after shifts, sometimes until the sun started rising over the Seattle skyline. I posted regularly, sharing pieces that came straight from the parts of me I'd kept hidden. Slowly, my following grew. I started taking commissions, small ones at first, portraits and logos, but each one felt like a brick in a foundation I'd been too scared to build before. Months passed. Then a year. One day, an email popped up from an online art magazine asking if they could interview me. I read the subject line 5 times. Me. The girl who crossed her graduation stage alone. The girl who ran away with a duffel bag and a breaking heart. The girl whose parents didn't even notice she had left until hours later. I almost deleted the email out of fear. But Mia grabbed my phone, read the message, and screamed loud enough to wake the entire house. "You're doing it," she said, eyes bright. "You're becoming who you were always meant to be." She was right. I had built a life far from the one that belittled me. A life built on talent, hard work, and the unconditional support of people who chose me because they genuinely cared, not because it made them look good. My parents reached out again around that time. A short message. "Mom. We saw your drawings online. Call us?" But I didn't. I wasn't ready to hear their voices. I wasn't ready to give them access to the person I was becoming. Not yet. Because this time, the applause was mine. 3 years after that graduation day, I returned to my hometown, but not because my parents called, begged, or even hinted that they wanted me back. I returned because the local arts council invited me to speak to high school students about pursuing creative careers. The irony was delicious, though subtle. The girl they ignored, dismissed, and left alone on the stage was now a role model in the very town that had barely acknowledged her existence. When I arrived at the auditorium, I felt a flicker of nerves. The same stage I had once crossed with empty seats staring back at me now felt larger, brighter, and somehow warmer. I looked out at the students seated in neat rows, their eyes wide with curiosity, and felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in years: belonging. This time I belonged because of my own choices, not because anyone else approved. And then I saw them. My parents. They had somehow gotten front row seats. Their expressions were unreadable at first, my mother's face tight, my father's jaw set, but there was no mistaking it, they had come. The speech began, and I told the students everything: how it felt to be invisible in your own home, how it felt to cross a stage alone, how it felt to leave behind the people who never saw your worth. I spoke about the nights working at a diner, the fear of failure, and the quiet triumph of posting my art online for the first time. I shared my story honestly, vulnerably, and without shame. And the applause that followed was genuine. For the first time, I didn't have to pretend it was for someone else. It was mine. Afterwards, my parents approached me. I could see the regret in my mother's eyes and the frustration mixed with awe in my father's. "Ava," my mother said softly, her voice almost trembling, "we didn't know, we didn't realize." "You didn't want to," I corrected gently. My voice was calm, steady. Not angry, not pleading, just honest. My father tried again. "We want to make it right. Can we talk?" I looked at them for the first time, really looked, and felt no longing, no need for approval. Only a quiet certainty: the girl they had ignored, the daughter they hadn't supported, had survived, and thrived, without them. That was my revenge. Not anger, not shouting, not punishment. Just life lived fully, beautifully, on my own terms. "I wish you well," I said softly. "But I've already built a life without you in it. And it's a good life." They nodded silently, the weight of their mistakes settling between us. I didn't need to explain further. I didn't need validation. I didn't need their applause anymore. I had earned my own. The flight forward. That evening, I walked out of the auditorium into the crisp, cool air of my hometown. My heart was light, my chest unburdened. I knew I had grown into someone they could not have held back or shaped, someone strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. The future stretched before me like a runway of possibilities, and I was ready to soar. As I boarded the plane back to Seattle, I looked out the window. The city lights blurred into a golden haze, clouds glowing under the setting sun. I thought about the girl in the parking lot 3 years ago, crying, heartbroken, and invisible. I wanted to tell her something. If I could go back, I would say, "You are enough. You are capable. You will rise." Seattle wasn't just an escape. It was the beginning. A one-way ticket hadn't just changed my life. It had given me one. And this time, there was no looking back.